Hello everyone, welcome back to my YouTube channel. My name is Daniel, and today in this video we'll be covering my round 3 game from the 2022 Philadelphia Open. This was an in-person tournament actually. My rating at the time was 1869. I was playing black, and let's take a look at what happened in this game. So I'm playing the black pieces, and my opponent plays d4. I go for my King's Indian. And actually pretty early on in this game I blunder pretty quickly. Here after pawn takes, I actually blunder immediately with knight takes e5. Knight takes e5. Because after knight takes e5, let's say, so if bishop takes e5, then I hang this pawn right here. And I can't play d takes e5 because then there's queen takes d8. So I actually blunder immediately, which is actually quite unfortunate. Thankfully, my opponent didn't see it after knight takes e5, bishop takes e5, and he plays f4, gaining space and putting a tempo on my bishop. F5, I play g5, bishop e3, bishop to e5, putting some pressure on this g3 point, bishop f2, I play c6, knight c7 ideas in the future, queen e7, f6, bishop d2, bishop d7, trying to be solid, queen to d3, trying to double up, I play queen to e7, getting out of the way of c5 ideas in the future, rook a to d1, I play b3, b3, trying to play bishop to a3 maybe. Maybe at some point even play d5 if the moment is right. b3, bishop b7, rook to d2, knight to d5, opening up the square. However, here I noticed that, so this is obviously a classical game, so I have like an hour on my clock. Here I spent quite a bit of time, and I realized that if I trade bishop takes, which is what happened in the game, e takes, the structure here on the queen side is already really locked, and all I have to do is simply play a move like f6, for example, which actually isn't the best move, but like in the game I played f6, and this structure is really locked. White, like the pawn structure is really locked. The only break that white really has currently is h4. I may be building up b4 at some point. But I really, considering that in the opening I was already going to lose, I actually preferred this a lot. Here, after e takes d4, I kind of rushed a little bit. I realized about 2 moves later that I should have started off with knight f6, so that I can put my knight on d7 and then play f6. So that when, if this bishop trade ever happens, then I can put my knight on e5. So to demonstrate, let's say g4, and then knight to d7, and then say bishop to g3. Then I have f6. If you take my bishop, then I can play knight takes on e5. And now this structure you're definitely not breaking through. Also with this knight here, there is no piece that white has, no piece of equivalent value that white can use to trade off for this knight. White has to sack a rook at the minimum in order to try to maybe get a pawn through. But that kind of depends on the position, and usually a sack would probably be favored by me because I can play rook a to e8, support it, double up here, and there's a lot of things I can do to prevent it. Instead, however, I rush and I play f6 directly, which isn't losing or anything. It's a slightly worse alternative, and I realize I have to put my knight on d7 most likely. So you'll see later on that I start to play a knight c7, knight a6, knight b8, and knight d7. Rook e2, putting some pressure, knight c7, bishop e8, a5, preventing b4. Here my opponent plays a4, which I was really happy to see. Now there's no way for my opponent to get in the b4 push. So now the queen side, there's no play that's going to be happening over here. Knight a6, bishop to c3, looking for the trade. And here I make the unfortunate blunder of playing knight to b8. So knight to b8's really not a good move. I should have played rook a to e8 first, for example, rook a to e8. Then after bishop takes e5 and pawn takes e5, then I can prevent my opponent's main idea, which is playing the move f6, because I can simply play rook takes f6. And I have this rook here for extra support. However, the way I did it in the game with knight to b8, now after bishop takes e5, f takes e5, now my opponent does have the move f6. Because after rook takes f6, rook takes f6, queen takes f6, and after rook to f2, queen to g7, my opponent can play queen to f5. Whereas if you compare this with the other position, if I had played rook a to e8 first, after bishop takes, pawn takes, say f6, rook takes, queen takes, rook f2, queen to g7, queen to f5, Here I have options such as rook to f8. Oh wait, no, rook to f8 blunders because of queen to e6. My bad. Here the main idea for white is obviously to play queen to e6, but now my rook's defending this. So now I can actually reroute my knight somewhere. There's also options to play e4, the computer suggests. So e4, obviously this is a pass pawn, so I can obviously push it. And this knight being on a6, it doesn't actually block my rook. So that was the fatal error, or the fatal blunder I'd made. So knight to b8, I unfortunately played. Here my opponent was able to break through. I played my knight back to a6, trying to get my rook to f8 or e8. I'm one move too late. My opponent manages to bring the pieces in, and after bishop to e4 in this position, I resigned the game. The reason why is because simply white's just overwhelming my position. White's going to win the d6 pawn at the minimum. Even can exert this pin right here to win my queen. And simply there's this pass pawn here that I have no way of stopping. Not to mention all of these pawns are going to fall next. So, quite the unfortunate loss. I already had the draw in hand. Unfortunately couldn't execute. I had two opportunities. One was obviously to bring my rook in before playing knight to b8. The second opportunity was, of course, instead of playing f6 and rushing with the idea of blockading the whole position, I should have played knight to f6 first, putting my knight on d7, and then playing f6, so that when I have to take back, I can take back with the knight, and there's no way of trading off this knight on e5. And in fact, the only breaks are probably h4, and if I play a5 when my opponent does play a4, then really it's going to be a draw. There's no way for my opponent to break through. So quite the unfortunate loss, but we all grow from the experiences. I know now not to rush as much, have to consider all my options, but still in general I'm still pretty happy with this game. I managed to, so my opponent was actually a candidate master. I still managed to hold the draw against the candidate master. I believe it was my first game against a master actually in a tournament, in an in-person tournament. So still decently happy with still decently happy even though the result is a loss. I still did manage to hold a draw. So yeah, hope you all enjoyed. Thanks for watching.